If it feels like rent has become impossible lately, you're not crazy. Over the past few years, rent prices across the US have risen faster than wages in most major cities. For many people, that means spending more than ever just to stay in the same place, or being forced to consider moving altogether. But here's what most headlines don't talk about. While rents keep exploding in high-profile metro areas, there are still parts of the country where housing costs remain relatively affordable, where rent increases have slowed, and where quality of life hasn't collapsed along the way. In this video, I'll walk you through 6 US cities that may genuinely surprise you, especially if you feel priced out of where you live right now. And one of these cities is doing something most US cities aren't. Rent there has barely moved at all. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Let's start with a city that quietly defies national housing trends. Pittsburgh doesn't usually make flashy best places to live lists, but financially it continues to outperform expectations. According to recent rental market data, average rent in Pittsburgh sits roughly 25 to 35% below the national average, depending on neighborhood and apartment type. Even more importantly, rent growth has been relatively modest compared to major coastal cities. What's driving that stability? First, Pittsburgh has a diverse and resilient job base. Healthcare, education, and research institutions make up a large part of the local economy, which helps prevent the boom and bust cycles seen in more speculative housing markets. Second, the city never experienced the same level of housing overbuilding or investor-driven price spikes that hit places like Austin or Phoenix. That combination has kept both rents and home prices more grounded. Pittsburgh may not feel trendy, but for renters, predictability is becoming a luxury, and that's exactly what this city offers. But affordability doesn't only exist in older northeastern cities. The next city shows how the Midwest can quietly outperform expectations. Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tulsa is one of those cities that people rarely consider until they actually look at the numbers. Rent prices in Tulsa remain well below the US average, with many one-bedroom and two-bedroom apartments costing hundreds less per month than similar units in larger metro areas. What makes Tulsa interesting isn't just the cost. It's the city's strategy. Over the past few years, Tulsa has actively invested in attracting new residents, especially remote workers and professionals priced out of more expensive regions. While relocation incentives made headlines, the deeper story is that Tulsa's housing supply never tightened enough to trigger extreme rent inflation. That matters. Low population pressure, steady job growth, and manageable demand have kept rental prices relatively stable. You also get short commute times, expanding downtown development, and a lower overall cost of living beyond housing, including utilities, transportation, and services. Tulsa won't appeal to everyone, but if your priority is reducing monthly expenses without sacrificing basic city amenities, it's worth paying attention to. And if you think affordability automatically means small or limited, the next city challenges that idea. Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland often gets dismissed, but financially it's one of the most practical cities in the country. Among US metro areas of its size, Cleveland consistently ranks near the bottom for average rent, meaning it's one of the cheapest large cities to live in. And unlike smaller towns, Cleveland still offers big city infrastructure. Major hospitals, universities, cultural institutions, professional sports, and public transit. Renters benefit from a housing market where supply has remained relatively balanced, preventing the extreme shortages seen elsewhere. Another important factor is home prices. Because buying remains accessible for many residents, fewer people are forced to remain lifelong renters. That naturally reduces pressure on the rental market and helps keep rent increases in check. Cleveland may not sell a lifestyle fantasy, but for people who want financial breathing room, it delivers something far more valuable: sustainability. But what if you want warmer weather without stepping into one of the most expensive housing markets in the country? Omaha, Nebraska. Omaha is one of those cities that almost never goes viral, but financially, that's exactly why it works. Compared to major metro areas, rents in Omaha tend to stay noticeably below the national average, and the city hasn't been hit by the same extreme rent volatility as many fast-growth markets. A big reason is demand pressure. Omaha grows steadily, but it doesn't get massive population surges all at once. That means landlords can't raise rents purely because of hype. Prices stay closer to fundamentals. The job market matters too. Omaha has a surprisingly strong base of stable industries like finance, insurance, logistics, and healthcare. That kind of economic mix doesn't usually create boom headlines, but it does create consistent employment, which helps keep housing markets balanced instead of overheated. Another underrated advantage: livability per dollar. You get shorter commutes, lower everyday costs beyond rent, and neighborhoods that offer real space without requiring a luxury budget. Omaha won't appeal to people chasing trendiness, but if your goal is to escape rising rent and regain control of your monthly expenses, this is the kind of city that quietly delivers. Now, if you're thinking, okay, but I want affordability without Midwest winters, the next city takes us somewhere very different: El Paso, Texas. Texas is often associated with rapid growth and rising housing costs, but El Paso is a clear exception. Despite being one of the largest cities in the state, El Paso has largely avoided the dramatic rent spikes seen in places like Austin, Dallas, or Houston. Average rents remain well below national levels, and increases have been far more modest than in most Sunbelt cities. Why? El Paso's housing market hasn't been driven by heavy investor speculation. Population growth has been steady, not explosive, and new housing development has kept pace with demand. The local economy also plays a role. While wages may not skyrocket, costs stay aligned with income, which is something many cities struggle to balance. Add to that relatively low crime rates for a city its size, a strong sense of community, and access to warm weather year-round, and El Paso becomes a rare case. A large, warm weather city that hasn't priced out its residents. Quick moment. If you're finding this breakdown useful, a like really helps the video reach more people who are struggling with rising rent too. And if you're interested in smarter moving decisions and lower cost of living cities, subscribing keeps you from missing future videos. Alright, let's keep going. Des Moines, Iowa. Des Moines might be the least talked about city on this list, but financially it may be the most stable. Rent prices in Des Moines remain consistently affordable, and unlike many fast-growing cities, the area hasn't experienced sharp boom-and-bust housing cycles. One of the key advantages here is predictability. Job growth has been steady rather than explosive, housing supply has kept up with demand, and the city has avoided the extreme volatility seen in more speculative markets. For renters, that translates into fewer sudden rent hikes and more long-term stability. Des Moines also offers short commute times, relatively low utility costs, and access to healthcare and public services that outperform many cities of similar size. It's not a place people move to for hype. It's a place people move to regain control over their finances. If rent is draining your life right now, just remember, you're not stuck. You're just in a market that stopped making sense. These cities prove there are still places in the US where you can live well without bleeding money every month. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.